Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into this paper. It's tackling one of the biggest mysteries in cosmology. Why are the amounts of matter and dark matter in the universe so similar?
Well, yeah, it's a question that's puzzled cosmologists for decades. Why is there 5 times as much dark matter as regular matter?
Right, and this paper we're looking at, Matter, Dark Matter Coincidence, and the Mirror World, it proposes a solution using this idea of a mirror world.
A mirror world. So it's this hypothetical sector of particles and forces that essentially mirrors our own standard model of particle physics. It's a pretty fascinating idea.
So it's more than just a parallel universe, this mirror world. It could be the source of dark matter.
Yeah, that's the idea. This paper argues that the amount of dark matter could be, well, a direct consequence of an asymmetry in the mirror world, kind of like the matter-antimatter asymmetry we see in our own universe.
So just like how there's more matter than antimatter in our universe, there might be extra mirror matter in the mirror world. And that's what we see as dark matter.
Exactly. And what's elegant about this idea is that it explains pretty naturally the ratio between matter and dark matter. They both come from the same fundamental asymmetry, just in different parts of the universe.
That's a pretty elegant explanation. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But how do we know this mirror world even exists? And if it does, how to get to be cooler than our universe, which is, a requirement for this theory to work?
Well, that's where the details of the model come in. The authors propose a specific set of particles for this mirror world. And there's a mechanism for making neutrino masses that deals with that asymmetric reheating issue.
So asymmetric reheating, that's the idea that the mirror world needs to be cooler than ours so it doesn't mess with the predictions of Big Bang nucleosynthesis, right?
Exactly. And
Hmm.
the way this model does that is by tying neutrino masses to that reheating process.
Okay, I'm interested. How does this work?
Well, the model uses Dirac neutrinos. That means neutrinos have both left-handed and right-handed parts, just like other particles. And these neutrinos are connected to their mirror counterparts. The mixing between normal neutrinos, mirror neutrinos, and some extra hypothetical particles, it makes a small but not zero mass for neutrinos.
So neutrinos get their mass from interacting with the mirror sector, but how does that cause asymmetric reheating?
It comes down to the decay of the inflaton field. That's the field responsible for the rapid expansion in the first moments after the Big Bang. In this model, the inflaton decays into various particles, including those involved in neutrino mass generation.
So the inflaton decays into regular and mirror particles.
Yes, but the key is the inflaton decays into mirror particles slower than into regular particles. And this difference in decay rates, it directly leads to a lower reheat temperature for the mirror world.
So the mirror world ends up cooler than our universe, just because of how the inflaton decays. That's a clever way to get around the asymmetric reheating problem. But this still doesn't tell us which particle in the mirror world is actually dark matter.
Right. That's the next layer of this, well, cosmic onion, you could say. The paper looks at two possible scenarios for dark matter within this mirror world framework.
Two scenarios. What are they?
In the first scenario, the mirror electron is the main candidate for dark matter. And this happens if the energy scale of the mirror weak force is higher than the reheat temperature of the mirror world. In these conditions, processes that usually convert leptons, like electrons, into baryons, like protons and neutrons, they stop working in the mirror world. And so you end up with too many mirror electrons.
So in this scenario, dark matter is a sea of mirror electrons.
Precisely. And these mirror electrons would interact with each other through, mirror electromagnetic forces, making them a form of self-interacting dark matter, or SIDM.
Yeah, SIDM. That's interesting because it might explain some of those small-scale structure problems that we see in galaxies. What about the second scenario?
Well, if the energy scale of the mirror weak force is lower than that reheat temperature, then the process is converting leptons to baryons. They keep working in the mirror world. This means some of the extra mirror leptons are turned into mirror baryons.
So instead of mirror electrons, we'd have mirror protons and neutrons making up the dark matter.
Yeah, exactly. And in this scenario, these mirror baryons would make up most of the dark matter.
Okay, so we have two possibilities. Mirror electrons or mirror baryons. How do we figure out which one's more likely?
Well, the paper goes into the quantitative side of the model to answer that question. It looks at the constraints that come from needing the right amount of dark matter in each scenario.
What kind of constraints are we talking about?
Well, for the mirror electron dark matter idea, the model links the mass of the mirror electron and the branching ratio of that inflation decay to the observed dark matter density.
That branching ratio, it determines how often the inflat decays into mirror particles, right?
That's right. So, by measuring the density of dark matter, we can constrain the properties of mirror electrons. Now, for the mirror baryon dark matter scenario, the model connects the mirror baryon mass and the energy scale of the mirror weak force to that observed dark matter density.
So both scenarios have parameters that are limited by how much dark matter we actually observe.
Yes, and the paper goes further. It analyzes constraints from needing to stop processes that could erase the matter-antimatter asymmetry, and to ensure the symmetric part of dark matter is, well, basically insignificant compared to the asymmetric part.
Why is it important to suppress the symmetric part?
Because if we had the same amounts of mirror matter and mirror antimatter, they would annihilate each other, leaving almost no dark matter. The model has to make sure this annihilation doesn't wipe out the dark matter that's supposed to explain what we observe.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
So by looking at all these constraints, can we tell which scenario is more likely?
The paper doesn't definitively say one is better than the other, but it does offer a prediction that could help us figure it out.
A testable prediction. Tell me more.
The model predicts a lower limit on the amount of dark radiation in the universe. Dark radiation, it refers to relativistic particles, other than photons, that add to the universe's energy density but don't interact electromagnetically.
Right, we usually quantify dark radiation with NEF, which is basically the effective number of extra neutrino species.
Exactly. In this model, mirror neutrinos and maybe a light mirror photon could contribute to that dark radiation.
So the mirror sector, which we think gives us dark matter, it also affects the cosmic radiation background.
That's the interesting part. The model connects NEF to the branching ratio of the inflat and decay, the same parameter that sets the mirror electron mass in the first scenario. This means that if we measure a NEF with future cosmic microwave background experiments like CMB-S4 and CMB-HD, we could test the model's predictions and maybe learn about the nature of dark matter.
This is where things get exciting. We have a model that explains the matter-dark matter coincidence and makes a testable prediction that could help us figure out what dark matter is. What's the most interesting part of this model to you so far?
What I find fascinating is how this model brings together different parts of particle physics and cosmology. It uses the physics of neutrino masses to drive asymmetric reheating. It uses the Affleck-Dine mechanism to explain the abundance of both matter and dark matter, and then it connects these ideas to self-interacting dark matter. It's a great example of how seemingly unrelated things can be connected. It really shows how powerful theoretical physics is, weaving together these, well, seemingly different observations.
You mentioned the Affleck-Dine mechanism, which makes the matter-antimatter asymmetry. How does it work with this mirror world?
Well, the Affleck-Dine mechanism uses the dynamics of a complex scalar field. Here, it's that same A field that drives inflation. The key thing is a term in the field's potential. It breaks both baryon number and lepton number, but it keeps a specific combination of the two.
So this term allows for an imbalance between matter and antimatter.
Exactly. It happens in 4 steps. First, there's the inflationary period, driven by the 8th field. During this rapid expansion, the energy in the universe is mostly the potential energy of 8.
Then what happens?
As inflation stops and the universe cools, the A field starts changing. Because of how its potential is shaped and the starting conditions, there's an asymmetry that develops. It's between the real and imaginary parts of A.
So this asymmetry just happens naturally as the inflated field changes.
Right. It's not put in by hand. It comes from how the field evolves. As the universe expands more and cools more, the A field starts oscillating around the minimum of its potential, like a ball rolling back and forth in a valley.
Yeah, I get that.
Now, during these oscillations, the asymmetry between the real and imaginary parts of A stays the same. And finally, the A field decays. It transfers its asymmetry to those singlet fermions, N and N, which then decay into normal and mirror particles. This process, it puts that asymmetry onto both the visible and mirror sectors.
Wow. So one mechanism from the dynamics of that inflating field makes the matter-antimatter asymmetry in our universe and the mirror world. This explains why the amount of matter and dark matter are so similar. They come from the same asymmetry.
Precisely. It's a pretty elegant explanation for the matter-dark matter coincidence. But wait, there's more. The paper looks into the numbers, exploring how the model's parameters are constrained to get the right dark matter abundance.
Yeah, we talked about those before. For the mirror electron dark matter, the mirror electron's mass and the branching ratio of the inflate and decay are linked to the amount of dark matter we see. And for mirror baryon dark matter, it's the mirror baryon mass and the energy scale of the mirror weak force that are constrained.
That's right. And the paper goes deeper than just finding those constraints. It looks at what they mean, showing how they limit the possible values for the model's parameters. This means thinking about the interplay between things like the decay rates of the inflaton and singlet fermions, how mirror particles interact, and how fast the universe is expanding.
It sounds complicated.
It is. Everything has to work together in the right way for the model to work. For example, the authors look at something called lepton number washout, where interactions could erase the asymmetry between matter and antimatter.
That wouldn't be good. We need that asymmetry to explain why there's matter and dark matter.
Exactly. The paper shows how the model's parameters can be picked to stop that lepton number washout, keeping that asymmetry and making sure there's the right amount of dark matter.
That's good. So the authors have been really careful to make sure this model works.
They really have, and they go even further. They consider how the Dirac masses of those singlet fermions, the ones involved in making neutrino mass, might impact the thermal equilibrium between our world and the mirror world.
Wait, could those Dirac masses be a problem for the model?
Yeah.
We need those sectors to stay somewhat separate. Right?
You're right to ask that. If the visible and mirror sectors were in thermal equilibrium, it would mess up the asymmetric reheating. The authors deal with this by showing that the processes caused by those Dirac masses, they stop mattering at temperatures above the reheating temperature. This keeps the two sectors from reaching thermal equilibrium, making sure the asymmetric reheating works and the model is still viable.
That's a good thing. It seems like the authors have thought about everything to make a strong and consistent model.
Their attention to detail is great and shows how thorough theoretical physics is. Every part of the model has to be checked to make sure it agrees with observations and theory.
It's not just about being consistent. This model also makes predictions we can test. We discussed that lower limit on dark radiation measured by LENF. Are there any other predictions that could help us check this mirror world idea?
This is where that idea of self-interacting dark matter, SIDM, comes back. Like we said before, if dark matter is mostly mirror electrons, they would interact through mirror electromagnetism.
Right, I remember that. But how does this give us something to test?
The strength and reach of those interactions depend on the mirror photon's mass. For the model to work, that mirror photon has to have mass. This way, the self-interacting mirror electron dark matter doesn't clash with what we see about the structure of galaxies and galaxy clusters.
So the model predicts a range for the mirror photon mass.
Yes. The paper says that for mirror electron dark matter with a mass of a few GeV, the mirror photon mass needs to be in the MeV range, about 1,000,000 times lighter than an electron.
That's pretty specific. How could we see a mirror photon that light?
Finding a mirror photon with such a small mass directly would be tough, but it could have indirect effects that we could see in astrophysics, like a massive mirror photon could change the energy spectrum of cosmic rays or affect how galaxies merge. We might be able to see these small effects with future observations. It would be evidence that this mirror world exists.
Interesting. So this model not only offers a way to explain the matter-dark matter coincidence, it also helps us understand dark matter itself and how it interacts. And it makes predictions that we can test.
That's what makes this model so exciting. It connects these abstract ideas to things we can observe, giving us a peek into this hidden world that might be shaking our universe.
It's amazing how creative humans can be, coming up with these models to understand the universe.
It shows how powerful the scientific method is.
Definitely. So we've talked about how this mirror world model could explain the matter-dark matter coincidence. But are there other things it could explain? Like, if this mirror world is real, does that mean there are mirror galaxies, mirror stars, maybe even mirror life?
Those are great questions, and although this specific paper doesn't go into those areas, the possibility of those mirror structures is definitely interesting. If the mirror world really is a reflection of ours, it makes sense that similar structures could have formed over there.
It's wild to think there could be a whole mirror universe out there that we can't see.
It makes you think about what reality is and raises big questions about the universe and our place in it.
Let's go back to self-interacting dark matter, SIDM. You said the model needs a massive mirror photon to make SIDM agree with observations. Can you explain that more?
Sure. If most of the dark matter is mirror electrons and they interact through mirror electromagnetism, we need to think about how those interactions affect how galaxies and galaxy clusters are structured.
Right, because if they interact too strongly, it would mess up how those big structures form, and that's not what we see.
Exactly. Simulations of galaxy formation with dark matter that interact strongly often predict cores that are too dense and other things we don't observe.
So how does this model fix that?
By giving the mirror photon mass, That limits how far the mirror electromagnetic force can reach. So those mirror electrons would only interact strongly when they're close together.
I see. So further away, the interactions would be weaker, and galaxies and clusters could form without being disrupted.
That's it. The paper gives numbers for how massive the mirror photon can be based on what we see in galaxy cores and the bullet cluster. That's a great example of colliding galaxy clusters that shows us dark matter really exists.
So this model has self-interacting dark matter, but it still agrees with observations.
It does, and in a clever way.
Mhm.
The way the mirror photon gets its mass happens naturally within the model. We don't need to add anything extra.
That's really neat. This model seems to be carefully built to solve problems and stay consistent with what we see.
It shows how thorough the authors are and how well they understand particle physics and cosmology.
We've looked at a model that says dark matter comes from a mirror world. This model explains the dark matter coincidence and gives us a way to understand what dark matter is and how it interacts.
We've talked about asymmetric reheating, neutrino masses, the Affleck-Dine mechanism, self-interacting dark matter, and a massive mirror photon. These are all part of this model's story.
It's been a journey through the frontiers of particle physics and cosmology, and I'm curious to see what future observations and theoretical work will tell us about this mirror world.
Trying to understand the universe is a continuous adventure, and models like this guide us, leading us to new insights and discoveries. As we continue to explore, we might find that the answers to our biggest questions are hiding in places we can't even imagine, places that challenge our assumptions and help us understand reality in new ways.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mirror world. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions. It really shows how creative theoretical physicists can be coming up with models like this.
It's really a testament to the power of the scientific method.
For sure. We've been talking about how this mirror world idea could solve the dark matter coincidence, but what other implications might it have? I mean, like, if there's this mirror world, are you talking mirror galaxies, mirror stars? Could there even be mirror life?
Those are some really interesting questions. And even though this paper doesn't really get into those specifics, the possibility of those kinds of mirror structures is pretty fascinating. If the mirror world is truly a reflection of our own, it makes sense that similar structures could have formed there.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think there could be this whole mirror universe out there, hidden from us.
It really challenges how we think about reality
Hmm.
and brings up some pretty big philosophical questions, about the universe and our place in it.
Let's shift gears a bit and go back to self-interacting dark matter, SIDM. You mentioned that the model needs a mirror photon with mass to make SIDM work with what we observe. Can you say more about that?
Of course. So if the main form of dark matter is mirror electrons and they interact through mirror electromagnetism, we have to think about how those interactions would affect the structure of galaxies and galaxy clusters.
Right, because if those interactions were too strong, it would mess up how those big structures form, and that wouldn't match what we see.
Exactly. If you run simulations of galaxy formation with dark matter that has strong self-interactions, you often get cores that are too dense and other features that we haven't actually observed.
So how does this model take care of that problem?
By giving the mirror photon mass, this makes the range of the mirror electromagnetic force finite, meaning those mirror electrons would only strongly interact when they're close to each other.
Got it. So at bigger distances, the interactions would be weaker. That would let galaxies and clusters form without being messed up.
Exactly. And the paper actually gives some estimates for how massive the mirror photon could be, based on observations of things like galaxy cores and the bullet cluster. That's a really cool example of colliding galaxy clusters that provides good evidence that dark matter exists.
So this model can have self-interacting dark matter without contradicting observations.
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
And it does it elegantly. The way the mirror photon gets its mass is a natural part of the model. You don't have to add anything extra.
That's really impressive. It seems like this model is very carefully designed to address potential problems while still fitting with what we observe.
It really shows the author's thoroughness and their deep understanding of both particle physics and cosmology.
We've spent this deep dive exploring a model that proposes a mirror world as the source of dark matter. A model that explains why the amounts of matter and dark matter are so similar and provides a way to understand what dark matter is and how it interacts.
We've gone into asymmetric reheating, neutrino masses, the Affleck-Dine mechanism, self-interacting dark matter, and a massive mirror photon. It's all connected in this model.
It's been a really interesting journey through particle physics and cosmology. I'm excited to see what new observations and theoretical developments will tell us about this mirror world idea in the future.
Figuring out the universe is an ongoing adventure, and models like this are our guides leading us to new knowledge and discoveries. Who knows, maybe the answers to our biggest questions are hiding in places we can't even imagine yet. Places that challenge what we think we know and help us understand reality in a whole new way.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mirror world.